what has been clear, and the testimony that was provided for the grand jury had just come out, I think, the last live show that we did on Tuesday. And it's quite clear. I mean, it seems indisputable at this point that there should have been a trial. And we talked about this on Tuesday, but this idea that the grand jury is simply looking at whether or not there was probable cause for a trial. And we saw McCullough get up there, the district attorney, who did not present any charges to the grand jury, which is extremely rare for the prosecuting attorney to do. And more facts have come out about the witnesses. He went up there and he gave a great speech, not a great speech, an extended speech on why Darren Wilson that it was so clear that there didn't need to be a trial. Some of the data from just some of the breakdowns, this one comes from PBS, about what the witnesses said. More than 50% of the witnesses said that Michael Brown held his hands up when Darren Wilson shot him. More than 50%. 16 out of 29. And in fact, because it's actually just about half, that seems to be a very good indication of why you need a trial. Only 5 witness statements said that Brown reached toward his waist during the confrontation leading up to the Wilson shooting him to death. So presumably there was at least 29 statements, right? At least 29 people saw or would have seen him reaching for his waistline. And remember that when we talk about Tamir Rice, the 12-year-old shot in Cleveland. There's just something about, apparently, black men and boys who they just can't help but to reach for their waist all the time. More than half the witness statements said that Brown was running away from Wilson when the police officer opened fire. Fewer than 1/5 indicated that was not the case. Remember, the bar here is just whether or not there is even a chance, a probability that he could be convicted of a crime. Okay? More than half the witnesses say that he had his hand up. More than half the witnesses say that he was running away as the police officer fired on him. There was an even split among witnesses that said Wilson fired upon Brown after he was already on the ground. There's only six witness statements said that Brown was kneeling when Wilson opened fire on him. More than half the witness statements did not mention whether or not he was kneeling. This is stunning. It's stunning. On top of all this, we now know that the police violated their own protocols over and over again in the wake of the shooting. From the Washington Post, when Ferguson, Missouri police officer Darren Wilson left the scene of the fatal shooting of the unarmed Michael Brown, he returned to the police station unescorted, washed blood off his hands, placed his recently fired pistol into the evidence bag himself. Remember the story about Michael Brown putting his hand on his gun? Wilson's movements after the shooting were among a number of police actions in the aftermath of Brown's death that the experts said were unusual. Officers who interviewed Wilson immediately after the shooting did not tape their conversations. That's weird. The transcripts also showed that an investigator from the medical examiner's office opted not to take measurements at the crime scene and arrived there believing that what happened between Brown and Wilson was self-explanatory. In the first minutes after a shooting, investigators are trained to have very specific processes. You got to protect the scene, the crime scene, to protect to not contaminate the evidence. The shooting suspect is always cordoned off, stripped of his clothing. His weapon is secured so that you can actually get some type of forensic evidence from these things. It's unbelievable what took place after that shooting. All of this indicates, at the very least, there should have been a trial.